Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the center of the Galactic Council chamber and felt the weight of 1,000 eyes upon her. The massive dome above her head showed the stars of 100 different homeworlds. Representatives from 12 major species sat in their designated sections, their bodies ranging from insectoid to reptilian, to forms that human minds could barely comprehend. She had stood here many times before. For 30 years, she had spoken words of peace in this chamber. She had negotiated treaties. She had calmed tensions. She had smiled when others insulted her species. And she had walked away from provocations that would have justified war. Today was different. Today, she carried evidence of something that could not be ignored. Honored representatives, Elena began, her voice steady despite the fear in her heart. I come before you with urgent news. Our intelligence networks have detected a massive military buildup along the borders of Threll space. A murmur passed through the chamber. The Threllians were a peaceful species. They had no military. They grew food on their fertile world and traded it fairly with anyone who asked. The Galactic Pact had designated them as a protected civilization 300 years ago, when humanity had first brokered the Great Peace. High Commander Vorax of the Kethari rose from his seat. He was tall and covered in dark scales, with eyes that gleamed like polished obsidian. His species had been warriors for 10,000 years before the Pact forced them to stop their conquests. The human ambassador speaks of intelligence, Vorax said, his voice dripping with contempt. What intelligence? Shadows and whispers? The Kethari conduct military exercises near our own borders. This is not a crime. These are not exercises, Elena replied. She activated her display, and holographic images filled the air above the council floor. Warships, thousands of them. Kethari dreadnoughts alongside Vornak cruisers and Scythian carriers. This is an invasion fleet. Vorax laughed. The sound echoed through the chamber like breaking glass. An invasion fleet? Pointed at a world of farmers? Ambassador, your paranoia does credit to your species' famous anxiety, but nothing more. Elena felt the familiar sting of the insult. She had heard variations of it for 3 decades. Humans were anxious. Humans were soft. Humans talked too much and fought too little. The galaxy had watched humanity broker peace after peace, always seeking compromise, always finding a way to avoid bloodshed. They thought this made humans weak. The ambassador from the Vornak Collective spoke next. Perhaps the human delegation would benefit from a reminder of how the Pact works. Military movements are not violations. Only military actions against protected worlds constitute grounds for response. By which time, Elena said quietly, the Threllians will already be dead. Another murmur. The Scythian representative, a creature of flowing tentacles and bioluminescent patches, pulsed with colors that indicated amusement. Dead? Such dramatic language. The humans have always had a talent for theater. Elena looked around the chamber. She saw it in their eyes, in their postures, in the subtle signals that each species used to communicate contempt. They did not believe her, or rather, they did not care. The Galactic Pact had kept peace for 300 years, but it had always been a fragile thing. The predator species chafed against restrictions. The neutral powers wanted to avoid conflict, and humanity had spent 3 centuries being the voice of reason, the calm mediator, the species that always found another way. In the process, they had convinced everyone that they were incapable of anything else. Elena thought of her grandfather. He had been a soldier in humanity's last great war, before first contact, before the stars opened up and showed them they were not alone. He had told her stories when she was a child, stories about what humans had done to each other before they learned better. We didn't choose peace because we're weak, he had said, his eyes distant with memories of things he wished he could forget. We chose it because we remember what we are without it. She pushed the memory aside. I formally request emergency council intervention to prevent the attack on Threll Prime. Vorax's lips curled back to reveal rows of serrated teeth. The council does not intervene based on human speculation. We require evidence of actual violations. By then it will be too late. That, Vorax said, is not our concern. The vote was quick. Elena's request was tabled for further discussion. In council terms, this meant it would be buried in committee and forgotten. The representatives began to disperse, already moving on to other matters. Elena remained at the podium, watching them go. The Threllian ambassador, A gentle creature with soft fur and wide, trusting eyes, approached her. His name was Yeneth, and he had been her friend for 20 years. "Thank you for trying," he said quietly. "Whatever happens, my people will remember that humanity spoke for us." Elena took his hand. It was warm and covered in fine down. "This isn't over, old friend. I promise you that." She left the chamber and walked to her private office. The walls were lined with memorabilia from 3 decades of diplomatic service. Peace treaties she had helped negotiate. Photos of ceremonies where former enemies had shaken hands. A small award from the council recognizing exceptional contribution to galactic harmony. She sat at her desk and activated a secure communication channel. The encryption was military grade, hidden beneath layers of diplomatic traffic. No one in the galaxy knew that humanity maintained such channels. No one suspected. A face appeared on her screen. Fleet Admiral Marcus Chen was an old man with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen things he never talked about. He commanded the United Nations Space Command, though officially his role was purely defensive. The galaxy believed humanity had only a small patrol fleet, a few ships for border security. Nothing more. "Ambassador," Chen said, "I've seen the council feed. They refuse to act. They don't believe it's real," Elena replied. "Or they don't care. And you?" Elena looked at the award on her wall. "Exceptional contribution to galactic harmony. I've spent my entire career trying to make peace work. I believed in it. I still do. But I just watched them condemn an entire species to death because they were too comfortable to lift a finger." Her voice hardened. "How long do we have?" Chen was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy. "Our sources inside the Dominion say they move within 48 hours. Maybe less. Can we reach them in time? We can. The question is whether we should." Elena understood what he was asking. For 300 years, humanity had hidden its true capabilities. They had pretended to be weak. They had endured insults and provocations. They had let the galaxy believe they were harmless because the alternative was too frightening to contemplate. If they revealed themselves now, everything would change. The other species would never look at humanity the same way again. The trust they had built, the relationships they had cultivated, the image of peaceful mediators they had so carefully constructed, all of it would shatter. But if they did nothing, millions of innocent Threllians would die. "Admiral," Elena said slowly, "when the Pact was signed 3 centuries ago, we made a promise. We told the protected species that they would be safe, that humanity would ensure it. We made that promise because we knew we could keep it. Then we keep it." Chen nodded. "I've already begun preparations. The Omega protocols are active. Fleet mobilization is underway." He paused. "Elena, once we do this, we can't take it back. The galaxy will know what we really are." Elena thought of Yeneth, of his soft fur and trusting eyes, of the children on Threll Prime who would never see tomorrow if humanity did nothing. "Then they'll know," she said. "Maybe it's time." Chen signed off. Elena remained at her desk, staring at the blank screen. Outside her window, the lights of Vareth Prime's capital city glittered like a field of stars. Ships came and went from the spaceport, carrying diplomats and traders and tourists. The machinery of galactic civilization continued to turn, ignorant of what was about to happen. Her communicator chimed. A message from the human embassy on Threll Prime. 3 words. "They're already here." Elena closed her eyes. 48 hours had been optimistic. The Dominion had moved faster than expected. The killing would begin soon. She composed a message to Admiral Chen. It contained only 2 words. "Begin immediately." Then she walked to her window and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, human warships were waking from their long sleep. Weapons that had waited for 3 centuries were being loaded. Men and women who had trained their entire lives for a war they hoped would never come were receiving orders to fight. The galaxy had forgotten what humans could be. They had believed the act. They had seen only the diplomats and the peacemakers, the reasonable voices calling for compromise. They had never seen the other side. The side that had burned cities. The side that had split atoms and poisoned the earth. The side that had looked into the abyss of its own nature and decided to build something better. But the abyss was still there. It had never left. And now, because 3 species had chosen to murder the helpless, humanity was going to show the galaxy exactly what lay on the other side of peace. Elena whispered into the darkness. "I'm sorry, Grandfather. We tried. Far away. Engines ignited. Weapons powered up. The children of Earth moved toward war, and the galaxy had no idea what was coming. The sky above Threll Prime turned dark at midday. Elder Yeneth stood in the center of his village and watched the shadows fall across the fields his people had tended for 1,000 generations. The crops were tall and golden, almost ready for harvest. They would never be harvested now. The warships came in waves. First, the Kethari dreadnoughts, massive vessels bristling with weapons that glowed with deadly energy. Then the Vornak cruisers, sleek and fast, spreading out to cover every corner of the sky. Finally, the Scythian carriers, their hulls opening like flowers to release swarms of smaller attack craft. The Threllians had no weapons. They had never needed them. For 300 years, the Galactic Pact had promised them safety. Humanity had promised them safety. A child tugged at Yeneth's sleeve. Her name was Mira, and she had just turned 6 years old. Her fur was the color of morning sunlight, and her eyes were full of trust. "Elder," she said, "what are those ships?" Yeneth knelt down to her level. His old joints protested, but he ignored the pain. "They are visitors, little one. But they are not friendly visitors. Will the humans help us? You said they always help." Yeneth looked up at the darkening sky. He thought of Ambassador Vasquez, her warm smile, her endless patience. He thought of all the times humanity had spoken for his people in the council chambers, defending them against predators who saw them only as prey. "The humans will try," he said. "They always try." The first bomb fell on the capital city. Even from 50 kilometers away, Yeneth saw the flash and felt the ground shake beneath his feet. A column of fire rose into the sky, and with it rose the screams of 1,000,000 souls. "Everyone into the caves!" Yeneth shouted. "Now! Take only what you can carry." The Threllians had built their civilization above ground, but they had never forgotten the caves. Deep beneath the surface, carved out over centuries, lay a network of tunnels and chambers where their ancestors had once hidden from the storms. They would hide there again now, though Yeneth knew the caves could only protect them for so long. He gathered the children and led them underground. Behind him, he heard more explosions, more screams, more death. He did not look back. In orbit above the dying world, High Commander Vorax stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Conqueror's Dawn, and smiled with satisfaction. The attack was proceeding exactly as planned. The Threllians had no defenses. They fled like prey animals before a fire. "Casualty reports from the surface," his tactical officer announced. "Initial bombardment has eliminated approximately 2 million hostiles." "Hostiles?" Vorax chuckled. "They are farmers. They have never held a weapon in their lives." "Standard military terminology, Commander." "Of course." Vorax waved a clawed hand. "Continue the bombardment. I want every major population center reduced to ash before sunset." The Vornak admiral appeared on his view screen. Her name was Thesic, and her scales were the pale blue of her species. "Commander, we are receiving a communication from the human embassy on the surface." "How touching." "They wish to negotiate, no doubt. To plead for mercy." "What should I tell them?" Vorax considered. "Tell them to evacuate their personnel if they wish. We have no quarrel with the humans. Once they leave, destroy the embassy." "Understood." The communication ended. Vorax turned to watch the bombardment continue. Fire bloomed across the planet's surface like flowers opening in fast motion. Cities that had stood for 1,000 years vanished in moments. Farms that had fed a dozen worlds burned to nothing. It was beautiful, in its way. The beauty of power finally unleashed. A junior officer approached his station. "Commander, I am detecting an incoming transmission on all frequencies. Human origin. Another plea for mercy?" "No, sir. It appears to be an ultimatum." Vorax turned. "Put it through." The main view screen flickered, and a human face appeared. It was a man, older, with gray hair and cold eyes. He wore a military uniform that Vorax did not recognize. The insignia showed a blue planet orbited by stars. "This is Fleet Admiral Marcus Chen of the United Nations Space Command," the human said. "Your forces are engaged in an unprovoked attack on a protected world in violation of the Galactic Pact. You have 6 hours to cease all military operations, withdraw your forces to your own territory, and surrender your commanding officers for trial. This is not a negotiation. This is your only warning." There will not be a second. The transmission ended. Silence held the bridge for a moment. Then Vorax began to laugh. The sound built from a chuckle to a roar that echoed off the metal walls. "Did you hear that?" he asked his crew. "The humans threaten us. The humans, who have never won a battle in 300 years of space travel. The humans, who cry and whine whenever anyone raises their voice." His officers laughed with him, though some of them looked uncertain. "Play that message again," Vorax ordered. "Let everyone hear. Let them know what humanity's fury looks like. Harsh words and empty threats." The message played again. And again the bridge erupted in laughter. Vorax wiped tears from his eyes. This was almost too perfect. The humans had just given him exactly what he needed, proof that they were as pathetic as he had always known them to be. "Continue the bombardment," he ordered, "and prepare a response to Admiral Chen. Tell him that if he wishes to save the Threllians, he should come here and ask politely. Perhaps I will let a few of them live as pets." His communications officer hesitated. "Sir, should we take any precautions, in case the humans actually attempt something?" "Precautions against what?" "Their patrol ships? Their diplomatic vessels?" Vorax snorted. "The humans have nothing that could threaten us. They have spent 300 years hiding behind their words. They have forgotten how to fight, if they ever knew." 6 hours passed. The bombardment continued. Cities burned. Millions died. The Threllians who had reached the caves huddled in darkness and listened to their world end above them. On the Conqueror's dawn, Vorax had almost forgotten about the human ultimatum when his tactical officer spoke in a voice that was suddenly very quiet. "Commander, I am detecting hyperspace signatures. The Council, perhaps, coming to wring their hands?" "No, sir. The signatures are human." Vorax shrugged. "So they sent their little patrol fleet to protest. Let them watch. Let them see what happens to those who are too weak to protect themselves." "Commander." The tactical officer's voice had changed. It held something that Vorax had never heard from one of his own kind before, something that sounded almost like fear. "These are not patrol ships." The first human vessel emerged from hyperspace, and the bridge of the Conqueror's dawn fell silent. It was massive, bigger than anything Vorax had ever seen. Its hull was black, and it bristled with weapons that glowed with barely contained power. But it was not alone. More ships appeared behind it. Dozens. Hundreds. A fleet that darkened the stars. "That's not possible," someone whispered. "The humans don't have ships like that. They don't have weapons like that. They don't have a fleet like that." Vorax stared at the view screen. His laughter was gone. His confidence was gone. In its place was a cold understanding that something had gone terribly, terribly wrong. A new transmission came through. Admiral Chen's face appeared again. But this time there was no ultimatum. No warning. Just a simple statement delivered in a voice that held no anger, no passion, no emotion at all. "You were warned," Chen said. "You did not listen. What follows is not war. It is consequence." The human ships opened fire. Vorax had seen battle before. He had commanded fleets in exercises and skirmishes. He knew what combat looked like, how it flowed, how each side tested the other before committing to decisive action. This was not combat. This was annihilation. The first Cathari dreadnought exploded before its crew even understood they were under attack. The second followed a heartbeat later. The third, the fourth, the fifth. Human weapons moved faster than sensors could track. Human ships appeared and disappeared, striking from angles that should have been impossible. "Return fire," Vorax screamed. "All ships, return fire." His fleet tried. They launched missiles and plasma bursts and kinetic projectiles. They fired everything they had at the human vessels. Nothing worked. The humans moved too fast. Their shields absorbed what couldn't be dodged. Their own weapons never missed. In the caves beneath Threll Prime, Elder Yeneth heard the thunder above him change. The steady rhythm of bombardment was interrupted by something else. Sharper sounds. Faster sounds. The sounds of a battle being fought in orbit. Little Mira pressed against his side. "What is that, Elder?" Yeneth listened. For the first time in hours, he allowed himself to hope. "The humans," he said softly. "The humans have come." Above them, Vorax watched his fleet die. Ship after ship, destroyed or disabled. Their crews screaming on channels that went silent one by one. The Vornak cruisers tried to flee. The human ships caught them. The Scythian carriers tried to scatter. The human ships followed everyone. In less than an hour, it was over. The Conqueror's dawn drifted in space, its engines destroyed, its weapons silent. Vorax stood alone on his ruined bridge, surrounded by the bodies of his officers and the sparking remains of his command consoles. A human face appeared on the one screen that still functioned. Admiral Chen looked at him with eyes that held no triumph, no satisfaction, only a terrible, weary sadness. "High Commander Vorax," Chen said, "your fleet is destroyed. Your allies have surrendered or fled. You will be taken into custody to stand trial for crimes against the protected peoples of this galaxy." Vorax found his voice. It came out as a croak, nothing like the confident roar he was known for. "How? How did you? We had intelligence. We knew your capabilities. You were weak. You were always weak." Chen's expression did not change. "We were never weak, Commander. We simply chose not to show our strength. We hoped we would never have to." "Then why? Why hide it? You could have ruled the galaxy." Chen was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with something that Vorax, who had never known anything but conquest, could not understand. "Because we didn't want to rule. We wanted to live in peace. We tried to teach that to the galaxy. We hoped you would learn." A human ship attached itself to the Conqueror's dawn. Vorax heard the sounds of boarding parties cutting through his hull. "But some lessons," Chen finished, "can only be taught the hard way." The screen went dark. Vorax closed his eyes and waited for the humans to come for him. They had all underestimated the humans. Every species in the galaxy had made the same mistake. Now they understood. The Galactic Council chamber had never been so full. Representatives from every species in the galaxy had crowded into the Great Dome, filling not only their designated sections but every available space. They stood in the aisles. They pressed against the walls. They watched the holographic display at the center of the room with expressions that ranged from shock to terror. The display showed the wreckage of the Dominion fleet. Hundreds of destroyed ships drifted in orbit around Threl Prime. Cathari dreadnoughts that had taken decades to build floated in pieces. Vornak cruisers burned silently in the void. Scythian carriers had been torn apart, their remains scattering across thousands of kilometers. And moving through the debris, silent and untouched, were the human warships. The Tellurian ambassador leaned close to her colleague from the Merith Collective. "How long did the battle last?" "Less than an hour." "That's not possible." The Dominion fleet was one of the largest in the galaxy. "It was," the Merith ambassador replied. Past tense. At the center of the chamber, Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the same podium where she had pleaded for intervention just days before. But she was not the same woman who had stood there then. The apologetic diplomat was gone. In her place was something harder, something that the galaxy had never seen before. 3 days ago, Elena began, I came before this council and warned you that the Dominion intended to attack Threl Prime. I was told that my concerns were paranoid. I was told that the council did not act on speculation. I was told, in so many words, to sit down and be quiet. She paused. Her eyes swept across the assembled representatives. The attack happened exactly as I predicted. 2.7 million Threllians died in the initial bombardment. Millions more would have followed if humanity had not intervened. The Cathari section was empty. Their ambassador had been recalled. The Vornak and Scythian sections held only junior diplomats who looked as if they wished they could disappear into the floor. For 300 years, Elena continued, humanity has been the voice of peace in this chamber. We brokered the Galactic Pact. We negotiated treaties between species who had been at war for millennia. We absorbed insults and walked away from provocations because we believed that peace was worth any price. She looked at the display, at the shattered remains of the Dominion fleet. We were wrong. A murmur swept through the chamber. Elena raised her hand, and silence fell. We were wrong to think that peace could be maintained by words alone. We were wrong to believe that showing restraint would be seen as anything other than weakness. And we were wrong to hide what we truly are. She pressed a control, and the display changed. It showed not the battlefield, but Earth, blue oceans and green continents, wrapped in white clouds, beautiful and fragile. This is our homeworld. For most of our history, we were alone on it. We had no one to fight but ourselves. And fight we did. We fought wars that killed millions. We built weapons that could destroy cities in a single blast. We came within moments of ending our own species, not once, but several times. The images changed. Historical footage, preserved for centuries. Cities in ruins, mushroom clouds rising into poisoned skies, bodies piled in trenches, the horrors of human history, displayed for all the galaxy to see. "This is what we are," Elena said. "This is what we have always been. When we reached the stars and found other species, we made a choice. We chose to become something better. We chose to hide our nature and show only our best face. We hoped that if we pretended to be peaceful long enough, we might actually become peaceful." She turned back to the council, "But we never forgot what we were capable of. We never stopped preparing for the day when peace would fail. We built weapons in secret. We trained soldiers in hidden facilities. We developed technologies that we never showed anyone, hoping we would never need them." The display changed again. Human warships, the same ones that had destroyed the Dominion fleet. Specifications scrolled across the screen. Weapon systems, shield generators, engine capabilities. The numbers were staggering. "The ships you see here represent only a fraction of our true military capability. We have more, many more. We could have conquered this galaxy 100 times over. We chose not to. We chose peace." The Tellurian ambassador found her voice. "Why? Why hide such power?" Elena's expression softened slightly. "Because power is a responsibility, Ambassador, not a prize. We have seen what happens when species use their strength to dominate others. We have done it ourselves, to ourselves. We knew that if the galaxy saw us as conquerors, they would never trust us as peacekeepers. So you lied to us. We showed you what we wanted to be, what we still want to be." Elena's voice hardened again. "But some things cannot be tolerated. When 3 species decided to commit genocide against a defenseless people, we had a choice. We could maintain our deception and let millions die, or we could reveal ourselves and stop the killing." She looked at the Scythian diplomat, who flinched under her gaze. "We chose to stop the killing. And now everyone knows what we truly are." The chamber was silent. Elena let the moment stretch before continuing. "Humanity does not seek conquest. We do not want to rule this galaxy. We have no interest in territory or tribute or power for its own sake. But we will no longer pretend to be harmless. From this day forward, the galaxy will know that the Galactic Pact has teeth. Attack a protected species, and humanity will respond. Violate the peace we have built, and face the consequences." The Vornak diplomat stood. His scales had turned pale with fear, but he spoke anyway. "And if we resist? If the Dominion worlds refuse to surrender?" Elena looked at him. "Your fleet is destroyed. Your military is shattered. Human ships are currently positioned around all 3 Dominion homeworlds. We have not attacked your civilian populations. We have not bombarded your cities. We have not done to you what you did to the Threllians." She paused. "But we could. At any moment, we could reduce your worlds to ash. Your species would cease to exist, and there is nothing in this galaxy that could stop us." The diplomat sat down. He did not speak again. "We choose not to," Elena continued, "because that is not who we want to be. We will not murder billions for the crimes of their leaders, but your leaders will face justice. Your militaries will be dismantled. Your ships will be destroyed or surrendered. These are not requests. These are terms." She looked around the chamber one final time. "For 300 years, you thought you knew humanity. You thought we were soft, weak, too civilized for violence. You were wrong. We are the most dangerous species in this galaxy. We always have been. The difference between us and the Dominion is that we choose when to be dangerous. We control our nature. They let their nature control them." Elena stepped back from the podium. "The Galactic Pact remains in effect. Humanity will continue to support peace and cooperation between species. But never again will we pretend to be something we're not. Never again will we let predators believe they can murder the innocent without consequence." She began to walk toward the exit. As she passed the Marith section, a young diplomat called out to her, "Ambassador Vasquez, if you could have conquered us all along, why didn't you?" Elena stopped. She turned to face the young alien, and for a moment, her hard expression softened into something almost sad. "Because conquest is easy," she said. "Any species with enough weapons can conquer, but building something that lasts, creating peace that survives. That requires more than strength. It requires restraint. It requires choosing not to take what you could take, not to hurt what you could hurt. She looked up at the stars visible through the dome. We spent millennia learning that lesson. We paid for it with rivers of our own blood. We will not forget it. No matter how angry we are, no matter how much the Dominion deserves to burn. She met the young diplomat's eyes. We're not your conquerors. We're not your masters. We're your guardians, whether you want us or not. And guardians don't destroy the things they protect. Elena left the chamber. Behind her, the galaxy struggled to understand what had just happened. Everything they thought they knew about humanity had been wrong. The peaceful mediators, the gentle diplomats, the species that always sought compromise, they had been an act. A mask worn over something ancient and terrible. But the humans had not used their power to dominate. They had used it to protect. They had revealed themselves not to conquer, but to save lives. The Tellurian ambassador sat in her chair and tried to process what she had learned. Her species had been in space for 10,000 years. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had watched countless species climb to power and then collapse under the weight of their own ambition. But she had never seen anything like humanity. They could destroy us all, she murmured to herself. And they chose to be kind instead. Beside her, the Marith ambassador was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. That's not kindness, Ambassador. That's discipline. And it's far more frightening. Above Threll Prime, human ships continued their patrol. Below them, rescue teams dug through the rubble of destroyed cities, searching for survivors. Medical ships landed in clearings, their crews working around the clock to save lives. The war was over. The real work was just beginning. The rescue shuttles descended through smoke-filled skies toward the ruins of Threll Prime's capital city. Lieutenant Sarah Chen stood at the open hatch of her transport, scanning the devastation below. Where a city of 3 million had once stood, there was now only rubble and fire. Thermal scans showing survivors in the Eastern District, her pilot announced. Looks like a collapsed shelter. Maybe a few hundred life signs. Take us down. The shuttle landed in what had once been a public park. Sarah led her team out, their boots crunching on broken glass and shattered stone. The air smelled of burning plastic, and something worse. She had trained for disaster relief. She had prepared for scenes like this, but training could never fully prepare anyone for the reality. A child's toy lay in the debris. A stuffed animal, its fur scorched but still recognizable. Sarah stepped around it carefully and kept moving. They found the shelter beneath the ruins of what had been a school. The building had collapsed during the bombardment, trapping hundreds of Threllians in the basement below. Sarah's team worked quickly, using cutting tools and gravitic lifters to move the rubble aside. The first survivor they pulled out was an elderly female. Her fur was matted with dust and dried blood, and she squinted against the light as if she had forgotten what the sun looked like. It's okay, Sarah said, kneeling beside her. You're safe now. We're here to help. The Threllian looked at her uniform, at the human insignia on her shoulder. Tears began to flow from her large, dark eyes. You came, she whispered. You actually came. Of course we came. More survivors emerged from the ruins. Children clinging to their parents. Elderly couples supporting each other. Young adults carrying the injured. They stumbled into the light and saw the human soldiers waiting with food and water and medical supplies, and they wept. Sarah had expected fear. She had prepared for hostility. The humans had just revealed themselves as the most dangerous species in the galaxy. She would not have blamed the Threllians for being afraid of them, but there was no fear in their eyes. Only relief. Only gratitude. A young Threllian male approached her. He was carrying a child who appeared to be unconscious. Please, he said. My daughter. She hasn't woken up since the building fell. Sarah took the child gently and checked her vital signs. Steady but weak. Probable head trauma. She signaled for a medical team. We'll take care of her. I promise. The father watched as the medics loaded his daughter onto a stretcher. Why? He asked suddenly. Why what? Why did you come? Why did you fight for us? We're nobody. We're just farmers. We have nothing to offer you. Sarah thought about how to answer. She thought about the history of her species, the wars they had fought, the empires they had built and destroyed. She thought about the lessons humanity had learned. written in the blood of billions, because it was the right thing to do, she finally said. That's all. That's enough. On the Kethari homeworld, the mood was very different. Commander Thesic of the Vornak fleet stood in the ruins of the Dominion War Ministry and watched the human ships in orbit through a cracked window. There were dozens of them, just sitting there, not attacking, not threatening, just waiting. The message they had broadcast was simple: surrender your military forces and your leaders, or face the consequences. No demands for territory, no tribute, no humiliation, just justice for what had been done. We should fight, growled the Kethari general beside her. His name was Korax, a cousin of the captured High Commander Vorax. We still have ground forces. We can make them pay for every city they try to take. With what? Thesic asked. Our fleet is gone. Our orbital defenses are destroyed. They could bomb us from space until nothing remained. Better to die fighting than to surrender to prey animals. Thesic turned to face him. Is that what you think they are? Prey? Korax's scales rippled with anger. They were supposed to be. They pretended to be. And now? The general was silent. Outside the window, a human ship passed slowly overhead. It was larger than anything the Dominion had ever built. Its weapons could glass the entire city in seconds. Now I don't know what they are, Korax admitted. Thesic looked at the ship and thought about what she had seen. The battle in orbit had lasted less than an hour. Thousands of years of Dominion military tradition, centuries of ship design and tactical doctrine, and none of it had mattered. The humans had moved through their fleet like fire through dry grass, but they had not been cruel. They had disabled ships when they could. Instead of destroying them, they had accepted surrenders. They had rescued crews from damaged vessels. Even Vorax, whose orders had killed millions, had been taken alive for trial rather than executed on the spot. They're not prey, she said quietly. They never were. They were predators pretending to be prey, and now they're showing us something else. What? Restraint. They're showing us restraint. They could have destroyed our homeworlds. They could have wiped out our species. They chose not to. Korax made a sound of disgust. You admire them. No. I fear them. And I respect them. She turned away from the window. I'm going to recommend surrender. Full compliance with their terms. Our leaders will face trial. Our military will be dismantled. And maybe, if we're very lucky, our children will still have a world to live on. Coward. Thesic looked at him with cold eyes. Call me what you like, General. But I've seen what they can do. And I've seen what they choose not to do. The second frightens me far more than the first. She left the ruined ministry and went to compose her message. Behind her, Korax stared up at the human ships and felt something he had never felt before in his life. The certainty that he was no longer at the top of the food chain. On Threll Prime, Elder Yeneth finally emerged from the caves. He had led his people underground when the bombardment began. For 3 days, they had huddled in the darkness, listening to their world die above them. They had run out of food. They had nearly run out of hope. Then the thunder had changed. Then the human ships had come. Then the rescue teams had arrived, and the nightmare had begun to end. Now Yeneth stood in the ruins of his village and looked at what remained. His home was gone. The fields where his family had farmed for 20 generations were scorched earth. The school where he had learned to read. The temple where he had married his wife. The square where he had watched his children play. All of it was gone, but not everyone was gone. Survivors were emerging from shelters all across the planet. Families were reuniting. Children who had been separated from their parents were being found. Against all odds, his species would survive. A human officer approached him. She was young, with tired eyes and dust on her uniform. Elder Yeneth? Yes. I'm Captain Rodriguez. I'm coordinating relief efforts for this region. She handed him a tablet, showing maps and supply routes. We've established food distribution centers here, here, and here. Medical stations are being set up in these locations. We're also bringing in construction materials to build temporary shelters. The winter on your world is coming, and we need to get your people under cover before it arrives. Yeneth looked at the tablet, then at the young human. You've thought of everything. We've tried. We knew this day might come. We've been preparing for it for 300 years. She paused. I'm sorry we couldn't prevent the attack. I'm sorry we couldn't save more of your people. You saved millions who would have died. You stopped the killing when no one else would. It wasn't enough. Yeneth reached out and placed his hand on her shoulder. Captain, I have lived a long time. I have watched many species come and go through this galaxy. I have seen empires rise and fall, and I have never seen any species do what yours is doing now. What do you mean? You won the war. You destroyed your enemies. You could have claimed our world as your own. You could have demanded anything you wanted from us. Instead, you're helping us rebuild. You're feeding our children. You're treating our wounded. He shook his head in wonder. No one does that. No one in the history of this galaxy has ever done that. Captain Rodriguez looked uncomfortable. It's just what we do, Elder. It's what we should do. Yes, Yeneth said softly. It is. And that is why humanity is different. That is why the galaxy was wrong about you. He looked up at the sky, where human ships moved among the stars. Guardians, Ambassador Vasquez had called them. Protectors, not conquerors. They called you weak because you chose peace, Yeneth said. They laughed at you because you refused to fight. Now they've seen what happens when you do fight, and they've seen what happens after. You could be monsters. You could be tyrants. You could be exactly what the Dominion was. He turned back to the captain. But you're not. You're something the galaxy has never seen before. You're powerful enough to destroy everything, and wise enough not to. Captain Rodriguez didn't know what to say. She was 26 years old. She had joined the military to help people, never expecting to actually see combat. The last 3 days had changed everything she thought she knew about herself and her species. We're just doing our job, she finally managed. Yeneth smiled. It was the first time he had smiled since the bombs fell. Perhaps, but I think your job is harder than anyone realizes. It would be easy to be cruel, easy to take revenge, easy to become the thing you're fighting against. He paused. It takes tremendous strength to be kind when you don't have to be. That's the strength humanity has. That's the strength the galaxy never understood. He looked at the ruins of his village one more time, then turned to walk toward the nearest relief station. Come, Captain. We have work to do. And I have hope again, for the first time in days. Rodriguez followed him through the rubble, thinking about what he had said. Maybe he was right. Maybe being strong enough to destroy everything was the easy part. Maybe the hard part was choosing not to. Above them, the human ships kept their silent vigil, and the work of rebuilding began. 1 year later, the memorial garden on Thrill Prime stood where the capital city's central square had once been. Where buildings had burned and millions had died, there was now a field of white flowers that bloomed year-round. At its center stood a wall of black stone, 10 meters tall, carved with the names of every Threllian who had died in the attack. Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked through the garden on the morning of the anniversary. She had retired from diplomatic service 6 months ago. She could not bring herself to stand in the council chamber anymore, to smile at representatives who had watched her people's warnings be ignored. She had done her part. Now it was time for others to carry on. She stopped at a section of the wall where the names gave way to a different list. Human names. The soldiers and medics and engineers who had died during the rescue operation. 37 of them. Not many, compared to the Threllian losses. But each one had been someone's child. Someone's friend. Someone's love. One name caught her eye. Private Maria Santos, age 19. She had been part of the first rescue team to reach the Eastern District. A damaged building had collapsed while she was pulling survivors from the rubble. She had pushed a Threllian child out of the way and taken the falling debris herself. Elena traced the letters of her name with her finger. She was very brave, said a voice behind her. Elena turned. Elder Yeneth stood there, leaning on a walking staff carved with traditional Threllian symbols. His fur had gone gray since she last saw him, and he moved more slowly. The year had been hard on everyone. She was 19, Elena said. She should have had her whole life ahead of her. She chose how to spend that life. She chose to die saving a child she had never met. Yeneth moved to stand beside her, looking up at the human names. That child is alive today because of her choice. She has a future because a human stranger decided her life was worth more than her own. Elena nodded. She had heard similar stories dozens of times during her months on Thrill Prime. Humans who had risked everything to save people they would never know. It should have made her proud. Instead, it made her sad. So many young people who should never have needed to be brave at all. How are the rebuilding efforts? She asked. Good. Better than expected. Yenneith gestured toward the city that was slowly rising around them. New buildings, designed with Threllian aesthetics but built with human engineering techniques. Parks and schools and homes, replacing what had been lost. Your people have been generous with their help. We could not have done this without them. It's the least we could do. No, Ambassador. It is far more than most would do. Yenneith looked at her with his wise old eyes. The galaxy is still trying to understand what happened here. They saw humanity destroy the greatest military force in known space in less than an hour. They expected conquest. They expected revenge. Instead, they saw mercy. Mercy has to mean something. If we had become what we were fighting against, what would have been the point? Exactly. That is what frightens them. Yenneith smiled slightly. A predator that kills without restraint. They understand. A predator that chooses restraint. That terrifies them, because they cannot predict what you will do. They walked together through the garden. Past families laying flowers at the memorial. Past children playing in the grass that had grown over the scars of war. I heard that the trials are concluding, Elena said. Yes. Vorax was sentenced yesterday. Life imprisonment on a neutral world. His co-conspirators received similar sentences. Yenneith paused. Some on the council argued for execution. Your people refused. Killing him wouldn't bring back the dead, and it would have made us no better than him. I know. Not everyone agrees. Elena had heard the criticism. Some species thought humanity was being too soft. Others thought they were being too harsh. You could never satisfy everyone. All you could do was try to be consistent. To hold yourself to the same standards you demanded of others. A Threllian child ran up to Yenneith. A young girl with golden fur. She clutched a small doll in her arms, a handmade thing stuffed with dried flowers. Elder, look what the human lady made for me. Yenneith knelt down, his old joints creaking. It's beautiful, Mira. Did you thank her? Yes. She said her name is Sarah. She said she was here when the bad ships came. She helped dig people out of the rocks. Elena recognized the name. Lieutenant Sarah Chen, the officer who had led the first rescue team into the Eastern District. The same team that had lost Private Santos. Where is she now? Elena asked. Mira pointed toward the edge of the garden, where a human woman in civilian clothes sat on a bench, watching the memorial wall. She said she wanted to visit her friend. Elena excused herself and walked toward the bench. Sarah Chen looked up as she approached. She had the haunted eyes that Elena had seen in many veterans. The look of someone who had seen too much and was still trying to make peace with it. Lieutenant Chen, just Sarah now. I resigned my commission 3 months ago. She gestured at the bench. Do you want to sit? Elena sat down beside her. They looked at the memorial wall together in silence. I keep thinking about the ones we couldn't save, Sarah said finally. We got there as fast as we could. We worked around the clock for weeks, and it still wasn't enough. You saved millions of lives, and millions more died before we arrived. If we had moved faster, if we had revealed ourselves sooner, if we had warned the Threllians to evacuate. If, Elena agreed. That word haunts everyone who survives something like this. But you can't change the past. You can only learn from it. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I met one of the children I pulled out of that collapsed school. She's 8 years old now. She wants to be a doctor when she grows up. She said she wants to help people the way I helped her. That's beautiful. Is it? Sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing, joining the military. I believed in what we were doing. I believed in peace. But then peace failed, and I had to become something else. She looked at her hands. The hands that had pulled survivors from rubble and held the dying in their final moments. I'm not sure who I am anymore. Elena thought about her own career. 30 years of diplomacy. 30 years of smiling and negotiating and walking away from provocations. She had believed in it too. And then it had all fallen apart. I'll tell you what I've learned, she said. Peace isn't a destination. It's a practice. You work at it every day. And sometimes you fail. And then you pick yourself up and work at it again. The fact that the Pact failed doesn't mean it was worthless. It kept the peace for 300 years. It saved billions of lives. That matters. And when peace fails, then you do what you have to do to stop the killing. And then you go back to building peace. Elena paused. That's what humanity has always done. We're not saints. We're not monsters. We're just people trying to do better than we did yesterday. Sarah nodded slowly. I think I needed to hear that. They sat together as the sun rose higher over the memorial garden. Families came and went. Children played. Life continued, as it always did, even in the shadow of tragedy. In the center of the galaxy, the Galactic Council was in session. New amendments to the Pact were being ratified. Humanity's role had changed. They were no longer just mediators. They were guardians, with the authority and the power to enforce the peace they had helped create. Some species resented this. They whispered about human tyranny, human arrogance, human ambition. But even as they whispered, they obeyed. They had seen what humanity could do. They had seen what humanity chose not to do. And they knew that as long as they kept the peace, they had nothing to fear. Admiral Marcus Chen retired from the fleet. He gave a final address to the assembled graduates of the Fleet Academy, young men and women who would inherit the responsibility of guarding the galaxy. I hope none of you ever have to do what I did, he told them. I hope the weapons we built rust in their hangars and the ships we designed never fire another shot. But if the day comes, if someone forces you to choose between your principles and your survival, remember this. We don't fight to conquer. We fight to protect. And we fight to make sure we never have to fight again. The graduates saluted. Chen saluted back. Then he walked away from the podium and into history. On Thrill Prime, as the anniversary celebration wound down, Elder Yeneth gathered the children around him for a story. This was an ancient tradition among his people. The passing of wisdom from one generation to the next. Long ago, he began, there was a species that came from a small blue world on the edge of the galaxy. They were not the strongest species. They were not the oldest. They were not even the wisest. But they were the most stubborn. The children laughed. They had heard stories about humans before. They knew humans could be very stubborn indeed. This species learned a terrible lesson in their youth. They learned that they were capable of destroying themselves. They came very close to it, many times, and each time, they pulled back from the edge. They chose to survive. They chose to be better. Yeneth paused, looking at each small face in turn. When they came to the stars, they met other species. Some were kind, some were cruel, some were both, depending on the day. And this stubborn little species decided to try something no one had tried before. They decided to build peace. Did it work? A child asked. For a long time, yes. For 300 years, the galaxy knew peace because this species refused to give up on it. They talked when others wanted to fight. They compromised when others wanted to conquer. They believed, with all their hearts, that everyone could learn to live together. But then the bad ships came. Another child said, yes, then the bad ships came, and the stubborn species learned another terrible lesson. Sometimes, no matter how hard you try, peace fails. Sometimes, people choose violence no matter what you do. What did they do? Yeneth smiled. They did something no one expected. They stopped pretending to be weak. They showed the galaxy what they truly were, the most dangerous species in existence. They destroyed the bad ships. They stopped the killing. They saved millions of lives, including many of yours. He looked up at the memorial wall, at the human names carved alongside Threllian ones. And then, when the fighting was over, they did something even more remarkable. They helped us rebuild. They fed our children. They treated our wounded. They could have conquered us. They could have demanded anything they wanted. Instead, they chose to be kind. The children were silent, thinking about this. That, Yeneth said softly, is what true strength looks like. Not the power to destroy, but the wisdom to protect. Not the will to conquer, but the choice to heal. Remember that, little ones. Remember that, whenever you are afraid, the humans are watching over us, and they will not let us fall. Elena Vasquez stood at the edge of the gathering, listening. Tears ran down her cheeks, but she did not wipe them away. Above them all, the stars wheeled in their ancient dance. Human ships moved among them, silent guardians keeping watch over a galaxy that had finally learned what peace truly cost. Not the absence of strength, but the choice of how to use it. And for now, at least, that was enough.